Okay, differentials. When I was on the East Coast, I've had this experience, some here, but less so, but more and more lately. The more I deal with kids, I've gotten younger and younger every year that I've done work in this area. I originally started trying to work with adults and when I was an attorney, did a lot of actually death penalty work for people. And one of the things when you do death penalty work with people on death row is that you learn that you start to sort of say, wow, could I have made this person's life different? And if there's a victim or family, how could their lives be different if we would have intervened earlier? And I think anybody who does forensic work, you start to sort of ask yourself, how could the system be different? And so as a consequence of that, and working with that population on death row, I have gone earlier almost every year. And so I am really fascinated now by 2-3-year-olds. I would actually venture to say, and I wasn't confident enough to do this earlier in my career, first 3 years, boy, make it or break it. You know, and I suspect you're probably there. I don't know, how long have you been practicing still?
Well, it's only been about, what year is this? 2 years now, since I've been licensed.
So what do you, give me your honest evaluation and feel free to disagree with me.
I actually experienced the same progression. I started with adults and I just keep going younger.
Yeah. Once you see the kids who come through the foster care system and you see kids with multiple placements, and very early on, Bowlby disrupted attachment, and it's going back to your Psych 101 class in undergrad school, the Bowlby stuff. I go back, if there's one book I read probably once a year, it's Bowlby stuff. Okay, it has shown over time, and unfortunately I train with people who are really good about it, helping me always think about attachment, but I've gotten even more so now. Now, California is much more attachment-based than the East Coast. The East Coast is much less attachment-focused. Not everything's bad mom. So let me be really clear about that, because I'm not into blaming moms all the time. But sort of having disruptive attachment your first 3 years, how you learn to regulate in the world, how you learn to be who you are, how you learn to soothe yourself, how you learn to comfort, and understanding that relationship. And what's very clear to me is we can intervene early on to change that relationship. Incredible Years therapy is phenomenal. CPP, child parent psychotherapy, Alicia Lieberman is starting to really, it's best practice, and I think it'll be evidence-based soon if it's not already. But understanding the difference between autism and attachment disorders, when I was on the East Coast, I was having a lot of kids who were adopted from Russian orphanages. They almost always happen to be from Russian orphanages by and large, because during that time period that was a big dip or a big rise in kids who were adopted. A lot of those kids weren't the actual age that they stated on the birth certificates when they came over, and a lot of those kids were institutionalized for 2, 3, 4 years at a time. Social deficits, they're not interested in social relationships by and large. A lot of those kids will have mental impairment in terms of IQ. Some of them, not all of them, will have motor impairments. So it'll start to look like autism. How you differentiate is by good clinical history. Were they deprived of a good, caring, comforting environment, number one. You know, that doesn't mean I wouldn't give an autism diagnosis to a child who was adopted out of an orphanage overseas or even had a poor attachment history here. Because of foster care or other things. But if I see an institutionalized background, I certainly start to look for that. So good clinical history, and then I look, did they have the opportunity to learn social relationships, which is really key. Because those kids you can intervene with, and the systems are probably there and intact, they just need to be laid down better. So you start to look at that. That makes sense? I've actually got a student right now who I think is going to do her dissertation on attachment and autism, which is I think a cool topic. Yeah.
Did you mention a therapy before, the CPP therapy? Did you mention one before that?
Incredible Years.
Incredible Years?
Yeah. Incredible Years is a more population-based therapy. It's parent workshops. It's, I'm redundant here, it's absolutely incredible. It's parenting tips. It's really good parenting and positive discipline, which I think every parent should be required to take a course in. Especially given all the news stories lately, it's really been incredibly sad. So it's positive parenting techniques, using time out effectively, using things that are strength-based in helping kids redirect, that sort of thing. It's really great, especially with the population you're working with, Sylvie. Those classes are at a 2nd or 3rd grade reading level. They're really, you'll find, I think, the parenting tips, parents can put parenting tips on the refrigerator. I give them handouts and all sorts of functional tools that I've found in my practice are incredibly helpful.
Do you like PCIT?
For some kids, not for everybody. I do like PCIT, but not for everybody. It's incredibly expensive because you have to have all the equipment. You have to be trained on it. I don't think it's largely population-based. So I find that if the basic attachment isn't there, PCIT is less helpful. Okay. Parent has to be pretty stable too. I don't tend to find those for my higher, for my higher functioning folks. That's great. If I don't have a high functioning parent, PCIT doesn't work. It's just not happening. Does everybody know what parent-child interaction therapy is? It was developed by Sheila Iberg out of Florida. You can go train on it. I highly recommend. How many people here have done PCIT? You're trained? You're trained? You're trained?
I'm not formally trained, but I've observed.
But you've done enough to. Yeah, it's really can be, for certain families who are higher functioning, you can absolutely work good things. For non-stable parents, I've not found it to be helpful at all, personally.
And the Incredible Years therapy, is that like a, I could just Google search it and find out about
Oh yeah, well I'll put that into the treatment section. I was focusing on more autism treatments. It sounds like what you guys are really going for a child assessment course for CE and sort of treatments for child assessment. Is that what I'm hearing or not? You're not? No, you want to focus on autism?
No, I'm both.
Okay.
Sort of like,
it sounds like a good CE course would be child assessment and treatments.
That would be too, but I don't.
This is more autism, so I don't want to spend too much time there, but I think it's helpful to understand that some of the therapies. I certainly have parents of kids with autism spectrum disorders who found Incredible Years techniques helpful. And I think you would also find, even if you get the book off Amazon, you can get the book for $3 or $4. It gives all these great parenting tips, and it's all positive, discipline, catching kids, doing good, those sorts of things. I actually just bought another copy because I lend out my copies and they never come back. I bought a copy the other day off of Amazon used for $3.49, and it was $2 to ship it. So there's some great parenting tools in there. Okay, so that's the first category, attachment disorders. ADHD, I'm getting the Connors, I'm getting the Basque, and I'm doing a test of variable intention. Okay? In lower functioning kids, once you get, first of all, I tease out if I'm getting an IQ. I look to see if you're 70 or above, that's when I start to sort of try to tease out the attention more. If it's 70 or below and in the MR range, teasing out MR, ADHD, I sort of default to the MR. Now, if they've got social issues, the major impairment, they're sitting in the corner, not interested in other kids, I look to autism. If they're interested in other kids, IQ below 70, I start to look at MR and the deficits in adaptive functioning. I just gave you the clinical algorithm that goes through my head. Does that make sense to everybody? I look for social motivation. You can have autism and not be socially motivated, period. You can have MR and be less socially motivated, but I find that you're at least interested in interacting with people at some level, typically. Now, I've certainly diagnosed it, but I'm just giving you some hard and fast rules. If they're not socially motivated, start thinking autism. If they're very socially motivated and an IQ over 70, but they can't do social relationships, meaning they're interested in having a conversation with you, but alienate other kids, start thinking Asperger's syndrome, nonverbal learning disability, pervasive development disorder, not otherwise specified, for right now.
If they what then consider those things?
If they're interested in social relationships and smart, but they alienate other kids with language or their use, or they're missing social skills. If they're pretty smart and they're missing social cues and interested in social relationships, I look at my Connors, I look at my Basque, I look at my test of variable attention, and I start to try to tease out the ADHD diagnosis. Is the attention causing them to miss the social cues? Or is it that their social abilities are so bad that they're not getting the social cues? And that's where instruments like the PDD-BI, with your attention measures, you have to give both of them to start to tease that out. And that's really what you're trying to understand. Why are they not social? Is it because they're missing it, because they're out of their chair, or they're inattentive, which would lead you to believe the ADHD diagnosis, or is it because they have a spectrum disorder? Sounds like I need a slide in here that helps me go through these clinical algorithms. That would be helpful. So next time, you guys are really, thank you for all the good feedback. MR, I'm looking in adaptive functioning deficits and IQ, obviously. Within the spectrum, we talked about briefly, but again, lower functioning, no social interest, I start to look at autism. Higher functioning, social interest, restricted and repetitive interests, really pervasive. Not just an interest in horses for girls, but so consuming that they know every name of every type of horse that has ever lived. And that restricted repetitive interest gets in the way of having a social relationship. Then I start to think about Asperger's syndrome, and no clinically significant delay in language. Pervasive development disorder not otherwise specified, the kids who have some sort of mild neurological issue, some sort of delay, not really quantifiable, behind, sort of a global, more global. I had a case last year of a 3-year-old little sweet pea, cute little kid, pulling large clumps of hair out, diagnosed with autism. Trichotillomania at its finest. Got her manualized treatment and was doing just wonderful last time I saw her.
How do you treat them?
Trichotillomania, there are manualized protocols to treat. There are really good evidence-based therapies out there. With older adolescents, I've done a fair amount of trichotillomania treatment. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Typical SSRIs tend to not be as effective for trichotillomania.
So if you saw trichotillomania in a young child, like say under the age of 5, would you say you diagnosed that as an autism spectrum disorder?
No, I didn't. They came to me with an autism diagnosis.
Okay.
She had big clumps pulled out of her hair. I said, this child has trichotillomania. Let's get her into an evidence-based treatment.
Right, yeah.
No, I said, let's get her into an evidence-based treatment. Again, she's not going to be very social if other kids see she's pulling her hair out, right? Kids don't want to play with you if you don't have hair on your head. You know, it's just, no, I mean, it's really true. You have to be that functional when you look at a child. Why isn't another child wanting to play? And if you're in a therapeutic, the other thing I love about the Incredible Years program is that you can do a therapeutic group program. We were running a therapeutic nursery school at San Diego Center for Children for a while, where we had 6 to 8 kids who were foster care kids, you know, and put them into a group situation, and you see really quickly why kids don't want to play with other kids. And you quantify that really quickly, you know. And that's one of the reasons for younger kids, I still will go to the preschool if I can to understand a little bit better, especially for first-time parents. What's going on? Teacher can usually describe it, but you also have teachers who sometimes just don't like the kid. Hate to say it, but it's true. Okay, so trichotillomania, OCD, make sure you do a good rule out on that. There's an OCD checklist online that you can get out of the Yale book and a couple others. You guys are all writing this down, so I need to send this to you. Tourette Syndrome, again, something way underdiagnosed. Motor, vocal symptoms for at least 1 year. Sorry, is it 6 months or 1 year? Does anybody remember? I have to look at my, I think it's 1 year. It's 1 year. For some reason in my head I'm thinking 1 year. I'd have to go back and look at my DSM. But look for clicking, look for odd finger movements, look for more complex tics. A lot of those kids will do clicking noises. Look for those sorts of things. TS, OCD, and ADHD tend to run together. So when you see Tourette syndrome, you're probably going to see, if you're doing a WISC, a differential between the PCI and the VCI, and you're probably going to see ADHD. So be looking out for those things. For inattentiveness, anxiety tends to run together with that. So when you're looking at, which makes sense, if you're missing stuff and you know you're missing stuff and you're aware of it, even if you're a little kid, you start to get anxious. So start to look out for that. My favorite therapy for anxiety in kids, Coping Cat by Philip Kendall. Another book you can buy on Amazon, evidence-based, really great treatment.
Who's it by?
Philip Kendall, Kendall, out of Philadelphia. Coping Cat.
What ages?
I believe now they have one that goes down to really little kids on that.
But do older kids like it?
Yes, yes. There's a
10-year-olds?
yeah. There's a portion of it that you can do for older kids.
Okay.
Social anxiety won't go out because it causes so much upset and they get just paralyzed by fear in social situations. Kids with autism tend to not be paralyzed by fear in that situation, or have the intense fear. They either aren't interested in doing social interactions or they don't get that they're alienating other kids. It's anticipatory anxiety. They'll tell you, the kids who are socially anxious will tell you, my heart started sweating. When I was growing up, one of my best friends in school would throw up every morning before school because she was so socially anxious. You know, and yeah, so that's sort of the differential. They'll be able to tell you, I get so sweaty palms. You know, in adults, you know, I've seen it in college kids who say, I can't go to parties, I can't talk. You'll see it in adults, I can't go to a cocktail party and have small talk or conversation. I'm gripped with fear that I'm gonna be stupid or somebody's gonna see me, I'm gonna make a mistake or those sorts of things. So really the extreme fear of social anxiety, of social situations.
They also know what to do in the situation, so they're just afraid to do it, whereas a kid with autism doesn't know what to do. They're not afraid of it, they just don't know how to act.
Correct. Or they don't know that they don't know how to do it if they're higher functioning. Exactly. So I agree, yeah. But the key is that they will be able to tell you what they could do. You're absolutely right. But they're so fearful of the social situation that they don't go. They'll avoid it.